Om Dare Du Dare Du Re Soha. Om Dare Du Dare Du Re Soha. Om Dare Du Dare Du Re Soha. Om Dare Du Dare.
All right, welcome. So before we begin, I do want to just take a moment with a really amazing announcement, one that just filled my heart. Some of you may be aware of, some of you maybe not so much, but within the Tibetan tradition of Buddhism, the nuns for many centuries now have not been able to be fully ordained. Centuries ago, that lineage of nuns died out. And so the way that people get ordained, you need, I think it's 5 fully ordained monastics to ordain the next one. So I think it's 5. I should know this, I was ordained. But there hadn't been none. So there was no pathway for the nuns within the Tibetan lineage beyond novice monastics. And yesterday in Bhutan, 144 nuns received full ordination. It's just a breakthrough. It's something that has been debated and worked on, and how can we do it? And Tibetan nuns would actually go ordain in usually the Pure Land, the Chinese tradition, to become fully ordained. And there's been all this, debate, and so now that it's happened, and so it's kind of like a little breakthrough, and I hope the dam breaks. It's the first 144, and there's still going to be debate and all that. And but I think once the doors open, it's just going to flow. So pretty excited about that. There was a very high Lama in the tradition, and it was in Bhutan, and the Bhutanese royal family supported it. So huge thing that has happened. The nuns over these last years, since I've gotten involved in Tibetan Buddhism, have been really a force, and have now been able to have full access to becoming teachers and receiving the Geshe titles. And it's just been wonderful to see these breakthroughs. So anyway, a little happy dance there. Really excited about that. It also happened to coincide on Tenzin Palmo's 40th anniversary of her ordination. And so, as many of you know, she's one of our teachers. And when Laura and I were there with her, she hinted that this might be happening. And it turned out it happened to be on the 40th anniversary of her ordination. So a lot of cool things are happening there. All right. Well, last week, we wrapped up the text, the official part of the text on the Four Noble Truths by His Holiness 14th Dalai Lama. And he really summed it up with this advice for practice. Before we go any further, I just wanted to check in with any of you out there physically here regarding any questions on the Four Noble Truths, what we've covered so far, your daily practice, anything from last week since I wasn't physically here. And if you do have a comment, question, something to share, just unmute yourself and dive in, because I can only see this small top row. If you don't have a question, make one up. We'll pause for an official 10 more seconds here. Did anyone feel as though the advice for practice was helpful? Any insights there? Yes, Joanne. Oops. We'll get right to you online, Joanne.
I thought it was very helpful the simplification of it. As I think it was 2 weeks ago, you're very good about simplifying it down to 3 basic things.
Mhm. 2 weeks ago, I probably can't remember how I simplified it down to 3.
Pronunciation.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so online, because you probably couldn't hear, just the question about how we brought practice down to the 3 principal aspects of the path. And so within the vast array of Buddhist teachings and the different lineages and some esoteric practices, different things that people do, ultimately, what I was mentioning is what my teacher, Geshe Gelsen, said before the end of his life is really the 3 principal aspects of the path: renunciation, bodhicitta, and wisdom. So renunciation is renouncing really delusional thinking. It's, renouncing that, grasping that this or that's going to provide me the happiness I seek, the misperception of sort of independence and permanence, and a much greater renunciation of delusion, really. And that really gives a guide to, well, I want to know what's true. And within the path, then, bodhicitta, great compassion, and wisdom. And those 2 together are what ultimately liberate us, is compassion and wisdom. So those 3 things. And I mentioned in that talk that one of my friends, who's a great teacher who had done all kinds of empowerments, is a phenomenal person, spoke Tibetan fluently, translated esoteric texts. He wanted to get a very specific sort of blessing from this teacher and empowerment in this practice. And so he got an interview, he got all set up, and why do you want to do this? Tell me about yourself. And he told him, he started telling him what he's done and all this stuff. And the Lama was getting bored. You could just see he was drifting. He was like, blah, blah, blah. And then he keyed in, he goes, but all that aside, really my core practice is the 3 principal aspects of the path. That's really what I do. And the guy perked up and goes, okay, we can work with you. And so the point being that rather than chasing blessings and different esoteric things, not that those aren't valuable, there's a context for them. But really what we need to do is shift our mind. We really need to shift our mind. I'll use this mala here. I've got a mala here. And, people talked about malas. And Lama Yeshe would say, there's nothing spiritual about this. There's really nothing. It's beads on a string. And I can say mantras on this. Oh, my pimyo, my pimyo, my pimyo. And that's all nice. It can make me look very spiritual. But I can also do all these mindlessly without my mind ever changing. And I can do it, to feel comforted. I can do it to look okay. I could do it just out of nervousness. There's lots of things. But what's going to make this meaningful isn't the mantra or the mala. It's the mind that I bring to it, and why I'm doing it, and the context for that. I have these water bowls up here. I won't knock them over there. Okay. So water bowl offerings. And do you think the Buddhas really care if I pour them water? I don't know. I think they're good. I think they have all their needs met. I think you're all right. But why am I going to go through and pour water and think of the offerings to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and the virtues of others and all the qualities of others that have helped provide this water? Well, if I start pouring the water and making offerings and thinking that way, my mind is transforming. I'm thinking about, wanting something beautiful in my setting, and as I'm pouring the water, knowing that comes from countless others in the environment and the support that's involved, and that this ritual is something done mindfully, has been done for centuries. And then I can be in a very different place after I've set it all up. So, we have skillful methods to bring about a transformation of the mind or a different way of being. If you walk into a church, sometimes immediately you're shifted, right? You walk into it's beautiful, it's reverent, you're quiet, your mind has changed. So understanding this, it's within practices, if we really understand why we're doing that practice and how it can be helpful, then it's a good practice. Or we can have a lot of practices that aren't really going to be very helpful. But all of them hopefully would lead to renunciation, bodhicitta, and wisdom. Okay, somebody else out there is going to make a comment online.
I was going to say that last week, a couple of us afterwards were encouraged and appreciated His Holiness's take on the time continuum or whatever. And there were several areas that I highlighted. And when he says, regardless of whether it takes millions or billions of eons, once you're committed, then it doesn't matter, and you can make all that meaningful. You can make eons meaningful. And then the other one was another one was about the impatience. The more impatient you are, the more likely you are to obtain a poor result. And then the final one was I get a kick out of him saying his practice is very poor indeed, right? So I'm of two minds about that and whether it's encouraging or discouraging. But then at the end is, if you practice in this way, then after a year or after a decade, you will notice at least some improvement in yourself. And so I find that really comforting. It gives me a sense of ease and not striving and not being impatient, all that time perspective. So you asked if there were any thoughts on that. So
yeah, well, I'm so glad. There's as was talked about last week, we can get really fixated on a quick result. And the challenge is to avoid short-term states and cultivate long-term traits. Short-term states, we can do a quick loving kindness meditation. I can feel pretty good. And that's good, short-term state. But when I leave that meditation, how am I engaging with my neighbors? How am I engaging with traffic? How am I engaging with people? And so how do I bring that into my day? And then over time, a steady practice will allow those habits and tendencies and neural pathways and everything to cultivate. And when we look at, he says a year, but I would say that anyone who engaged in a daily practice for 3 months, you look, how have I changed in 3 months? We're going to notice some difference. But what he's pointing out is then I could do really good practice for 3 months and then sort of fade. And then people would come to two conclusions. One is, see, I can't do it. I'm losing everything. Or they could recognize there's an ebb and flow in my life. Some 3 months I'm all in and life gets kind of forget. And now it's time to begin again. And that rather than thinking I'm solid with my practice or I'm weak with my practice or I can't do my practice, how about there's times where I've been very solid, times where I haven't done it, other times I've been inspired, sometimes not. And rather than thinking of it as getting nowhere, recognizing that there's a cumulative effect. And when I'm again engaged down the road, I'm not where I began. There's an ebb and a flow. And, I've been doing this for a little while, but I've had ebb and flow. And sometimes very, very solid. And sometimes, there's been periods of my life where very minimal. And if I understand, as you're saying, and I'm hoping this is what you're speaking to, is that there's a comfort in that, to know that we are making progress. None of this is wasted. And for me, that's inspiring, that every day is a new day. Every day is a new day. And every day I am creating my future. And so every moment of kindness. And then even when I fall off, I'm learning about myself. I'm learning about, sort of habits and tendencies. And I'm learning, when I'm tired at night, it's not a good mental state for me, or I'm learning this about myself. And maybe I'm not ready to change it now, but I'm learning. And then later I'm a little more able to. And that's really the journey. It's not, okay, renunciation, I get it. Took that course, got it, I'm in it, we're good. Yeah, for 2 weeks. And then, then what happens? And what's happening is we've got a lot of habits, a lot of tendencies. We're wired pretty hard. And this is a process of unraveling. So there's some comfort in that, rather than a rush to achieve or a sense of failure. But not a slacking. This is not encouragement to procrastinate, just saying. Because, I used to do that, and I could do that again. And there's, that mind can be a little challenging. But what has been cultivated continues to grow. So thanks, Rita. Appreciate that. Okay, everybody feeling pretty good about the Four Noble Truths? You got it nailed. Okay, silence. I'm going to take that as a yes. And so at the end of the text, His Holiness gave, this was transcribed from a talk he gave 1996 on compassion. And so as promised, I thought we'd tap into that a bit. So once we had renunciation, bodhicitta, great compassion, and wisdom. Well, here we're just going to break down compassion as a source of happiness and well-being. And I think, nice to kind of hit the opening and unpack it a little bit. He really threw a lot in there. So we'll ease into it. I'll pop that up. I think I have it right here. Compassion, the basis for human happiness. Yeah, this was in the UK in 1996. First few paragraphs we'll just go over and start, and so look into that a bit. I think that every human being has an innate sense of I. We cannot explain why that feeling is there, but it is. Along with it comes a desire for happiness and a wish to overcome suffering. This is quite justified. We have a natural right to achieve as much happiness as possible, and we also have the right to overcome suffering. So just pausing there, that's, if you recall it, in the Four Noble Truths towards the start, this is where we started. And there's discussion on that. Does everyone deserve happiness or not? He's saying, this is what I'm sharing. And then some of us go, well, Jimmy over there, he doesn't deserve it so much. And, look at how they behave. And do you think you have a natural, an inborn right to be as happy as possible? And to have as little suffering as possible? So rather than just saying, well, that's true or not true, I think it bears, exploration. And the context for it is that everyone has this desire. Okay, so he's going to say everyone has this desire. And we'll go on to there and we'll have a discussion in a sec. Everyone has this desire. The whole of human history, the whole of human, sorry, I'm losing my voice a little bit. The whole of human history has developed on the basis of this feeling, right? There's a sense of I, and I want to be happy, and I want to avoid suffering. In fact, it's not limited to human beings from a Buddhist point of view. Even the tiniest insect has this feeling, and according to its capacity, is trying to gain some happiness and avoid unhappy situations. You can see animals, they're trying to avoid getting eaten or swatted or killed, and they're, trying to survive. However, there's some major differences. Okay, I'm going to pause there. So first off, is this true for you? Or do you have a sense of I and a strong motivation to be happy and avoid suffering? That's, I think, where we start. And then we look at it and go, well, okay, from the moment I wake up till the time I go to bed, how much was my motivation around wanting to be happy and wanting to avoid suffering? From what am I going to eat today, to how I drive, or whether I exercise or not, or what clothes I'm going to wear. I've got the 8 worldly concerns, getting what I want, not losing it, having pleasure, avoiding pain, praise, criticism, good reputation, bad reputation. And so generally those 4 are, I'm happy when I get what I want, not I'm suffering when I lose it. Pleasure, happy with. Pain, I'm suffering. Praise, I'm happy with. Criticism, I'm suffering. Good reputation, happy with that. Bad reputation, suffering. And then if we explore that, well, is there anything you ever do in your life that isn't based on getting what you want, trying not to lose it, having pleasure, avoiding pain, avoiding criticism, seeking praise, having a good reputation, avoiding a bad one? And I'm talking about even getting dressed, getting a haircut. What are people going to think? Do I look good? I did this myself, just for the record. So, what's appropriate to wear, not appropriate to wear? Is somebody going to think? Is it core? Is it primary? And as we explore this, we may find, wow, a lot of what I do is guided by that. Which, it's not inherently harmful. Could be, maybe not. And then he's taken the next step. Well, if I'm like that, guess what? Everybody else is too. Everyone else is too. And then we can see, guys, are people trying to find happiness? Now, then we may look, there's some people who love being miserable, right? So they don't want to be happy. Except in the statement, we just said they love being miserable. So maybe some people are more comfortable complaining and uncomfortable, being grateful, right? And so then we start to recognize, at the core is a desire for happiness and trying to avoid suffering. But from childhood on, from birth on, moving through our lives, we've all been exposed to traumas and joys and struggles and trying to fit in, and achievements and failures and abuses and successes. And through all that, we have been conditioned in certain ways. And adopted coping mechanisms so that we can be okay and so we can avoid suffering and have some degree of feeling okay or happy to whatever capacity we can. And so some people, in violent situations, growing up in that way, they're conditioned in a particular way to survive, again, to avoid suffering, to survive. And in a culture of abuse, we may have some coping mechanisms that don't allow us a positive, happy outlook on life, but rather maybe a cynical view of things in people and not able to open your heart or show what's going on, or shame. And other people maybe had more love, more care. His Holiness will get into that in a little bit. And they show up in a different way. And then people of other cultures have a whole different way of expressing their happiness and ways of achieving that. And within our own country in the South versus, the West Coast or New York, we have different ways of engaging with each other and different family systems. And so if we can differentiate the behavior from the motivation, a behavior that on the surface could seem, really coming from a place of not wanting to seek happiness. And can we look beyond that and see, well, that's actually coming from some way for them to be okay about themselves, their environment, their needs. Then we want to explore that. So I've never found anyone I've ever met in my life who wanted to be a bad person. I haven't met that person. They may exist. I haven't met all 7 billion plus humans. I have met quite a few, and I've met quite a few who have done many harmful things, like myself. And I've met many of them that, have actually changed their lives and have gone on to be incredibly beneficial to others. And I've met some that haven't. But I've never met one that didn't want to, deep down, be a good person, have a meaningful life. I've met a lot like me, just didn't know how very well. And so that's where His Holiness is coming from, is that if we understand this basis, that in the guise of seeking, in the motivation, not the guise, the motivation of seeking happiness, we can engage in some pretty harmful things for ourselves and others. And then he's going to kind of point out why here next. So he's saying even animals are like this. He goes, but however, there are some major differences between human beings and other animal species. They stem from human intelligence. On account of our intelligence, we are much more advanced and have a greater capacity. We are able to think much further into the future, and our memory is powerful enough to take us back many years. Furthermore, we have oral and written traditions which remind us of events many centuries ago. Now, thanks to scientific methods, we can even examine events which occurred millions of years ago. So our intelligence makes us very smart, but at the same time, precisely because of that fact, we also have more doubts and suspicions, and hence more fears. I think the imagination of fear is much more developed in humans than in any other animals. In addition, the many conflicts within our human family and within one's own family, not to mention the conflicts within the community and between nations, as well as the internal conflicts within an individual, our own shame and our own struggles. All conflicts and contradictions arise from the different ideas and views our intelligence brings. So unfortunately, intelligence can sometimes create a quite unhappy state of mind. In this sense, it becomes another source of human misery. Yet at the same time, I think that ultimately intelligence is the tool with which we can overcome all of these conflicts and differences. So where does most of our mental and emotional suffering come from? The actual event, or from how we're perceiving and relating to the event, the expectations we put on the event or the person or the thing, or my partner shouldn't have done this or shouldn't have been like that. I shouldn't have done this or that, and I have some shame. This should be different than it is. If only this would have happened, then I'd be happy. Worries and fears about the future, right? Worries and fears about the future, dredging the past, that the mind that we have is, as we stick a label on someone from a different cultural, social, ethnic, political background, we can just fill in that label. So give me a label, man. They belong to that political party. Here's what they're like. They're like this is what they're like. And the mind is filling all that in instead of the human being I'm talking to, and how things could be different. And the scary part is that once our mind adapts to a way of being, like I'm just thinking of my vacuum right now. Okay, we have a really great vacuum. It sucks, right? It sucks. And now once you've had that vacuum and then you get a mediocre vacuum, you're going to be suffering. You are going to be suffering. It's to such a degree. We had a mediocre vacuum, well, maybe even a vacuum that wasn't very good. And once we had, someone come to clean the house, right? And which is a rarity for us. But she came to clean the house, and she wouldn't come back until we bought another vacuum, right? Because she knows what a good vacuum is. And so you got to work twice as hard with this vacuum. And so the whole time you're vacuuming, you're suffering. And that really sucks, but not sucks the way the vacuum should. And so if I didn't have a vacuum, a mediocre vacuum is pretty good. But now I've had a taste of this other vacuum, and now I can get into places. Likewise, with our life, as soon as we get to a level of how like a computer should work, or this should function, the key should work, and then it doesn't. Oh, it's arduous. It's arduous. Except for, and I don't know about you, there's a few people here, we used to use typewriters. Right? We used to use typewriters. We used to have to put white out when we made a mistake, right? And how frustrating it could be, man. I had copied and pasted that 3 times on this Word document, and it didn't save. But when I had a typewriter, actually, I discovered erasable paper where you could just use an eraser on it, score. And so what happens with this mind then, once it has a taste of this, we can be suffering in an event that we once were very grateful to have. Because the mind's saying it could be different than it is, right? And then we're saying it should be different than it is. And yet at the same time, what's hard about typing on a computer? What's difficult about that? So we'll start to see that this intelligence actually is going to contribute to our suffering to an immense degree in very simple things we do. And I didn't even want to bring up that, when the vacuum doesn't pick up that one thing and you try like 10 times, 11 times, and then, oh my God, I have to bend over and actually pick that thing up. Oh God. Right? And of course, I tried it 10 times, and when picking up would have been fine. So he's making a point here that my human intelligence is actually creating a lot of problems in my life, but it could be used to cultivate happiness. So the intelligence isn't the problem. It's the way we've been using it and the way we fill in labels and the way we project and the belief system around happiness, that this or that thing, if only, this could happen. And some things seem really rational that are irrational. I'm going to give you one right here. I have a friend I've known for quite a while. We used to teach together, and she has paralysis on sides of her body. She needs accommodation to drive a car. She has a special kind of a car, and she's in pain quite a bit. And she was actually taking a mindfulness course with us, and she was in some real pain. Like she had a little setback in her condition, and she was taking this course and working with her mind and working with mindfulness and looking at real sources of happiness and suffering. And what she shared with me really caught my attention. She shared with me the thought had been strong in her mind that if I could be healthy, I could be happy. That seems pretty rational, doesn't it? You're in that state. You haven't been able, she's lived like that. She even taught in inner city high school with me in that condition. And the thought was, if I could be healthy, I could be happy. I mean, it seems very rational, right? Except for as she's exploring that thought, she saw a lot of healthy people that aren't happy. Right? I mean, there's a lot of very fit people out in this world that are not happy at all. And they just clicked. Like, that's an irrational thought. How many irrational thoughts do we have around happiness? If only, or if this. And then this or that happens, and you're happy, I don't know, 10 minutes, an hour, a day, whatever. And then what happens? Well, I need this next thing to happen. Or this next thing, or this next thing. Hence the wheel of samsara, born out of irrational thoughts, not based in reality, that seem totally rational. I'm actually cultivating desire, dissatisfaction. I mean, we could be here now, and I know we got people from all over here in the US and some pretty beautiful places. I mean, Mark, look at where Mark's at. Mark Suma, man, was that England? Where you at there? Come on, give it up. Where you at? What's the picture in the background?
It's Prague.
Prague.
Charles Bridge in Prague.
Now, wouldn't you be happier if you were in Prague? I mean, wouldn't that be cool? Or, I have my friend hanging out on the beach in Hawaii right now. We could talk about that. And it's like, wow, a minute ago I was fine, but I'm not in Hawaii. I'm not in Prague. And boy, wouldn't it be better if I was? Just pretty instantly, the mind can go to what I don't have. And then something's going with that. So if we don't start paying attention to this process and how my intelligence is used, is my intelligence cultivating dissatisfaction, or is it cultivating happiness? Here's another irrational thought that science has borne out that's not true. The more choice I have, the happier I'll be. It doesn't work that way. The more choice you have, the more you're worrying about which choice you make. And then once you made it, you wonder if I made the other. And I'm just talking about the potato chip aisle at the market. I don't know about you, but man, I could be there 15, 20 minutes. And still not sure I got the right bag because, that other brand. And so what research has shown is that actually the more choice we have, the less satisfied we are because we're wondering about the other ones. Whereas if you didn't have anything and you got a bag of chips, cool, I got a bag of chips, I'm pretty happy. And, didn't have a vacuum, now I got a vacuum. Go shopping, there's 20 different vacuums to buy. Now I'm comparing. So as we engage in our lives, His Holiness coming right off the bat is to recognize how this intelligence that we have can really work against our very happiness. Does that seem reasonable to you? Or is that irrational? Head nod, something. 3 thumbs up. Okay, good. Let's see where we're at. Yeah, let's see if we can go another paragraph in there. So he's also saying, well, this intelligence actually can help us overcome this, right? I mean, we just use our intelligence to debunk some things. From this point of view, all of the various species of animal on the planet, human beings are the biggest troublemakers. That is clear. I imagine that if there were no longer any humans on the planet itself would be safer. Certainly, millions of fish, chicken, and other small animals might enjoy some sort of genuine liberation. It is therefore important that human intelligence be utilized in a constructive way. That is the key. If we utilize its capacity properly, then not only human beings would become less harmful to each other and to the planet, but also individual human beings would be happier in themselves. It is in our hands. Whether we utilize our intelligence in the right way or the wrong way, it is up to us. Nobody can impose their values on us. How can we learn to use our capacity constructively? Well, first, we need to recognize our nature. And then, if we have the determination, there is a real possibility of transforming the human heart. And on this basis, I'll speak today. Actually, it'll probably be next Wednesday, on how a human being can find happiness as an individual, because I believe the individual is the key to all the rest. For change to happen in any community, the initiative must come from the individual. If the individual can be a good, calm, peaceful person, this automatically brings a positive atmosphere to the family around him or her. When parents are warm-hearted, peaceful, and calm people, generally speaking, their children will also develop that attitude and behavior. So I'm going to pause right there. And this is what I think is counterintuitive to, I just think, a lot of humans is we watch the news, we get information, and we think how to make a difference out there. We're not asking, how do I make a difference here? And one of my favorite quotes from Leo Tolstoy, everyone thinks about changing the world, no one thinks about changing themselves. And he's going to make the point, if you want to change the world, you need to change you. So he doesn't say you don't do it. We're going to get into that a little bit, but he's saying that we need to start here. If I can cultivate a heart of compassion, of care, of concern, of friendliness, well, then I'm going to have a much greater chance affecting others. But if I think other people should be friendly and kind and tolerant, but I'm intolerant to the people who I think should be tolerant, you see where there's a disconnect. So first, in this process is understanding that we can cultivate these qualities within ourselves, and then we're going to be much more effective at making a difference in the world. So if we can cultivate calm, if we can cultivate peace, ease, resiliency, a level of well-being, we're going to be much more capable of bringing that into the world and making a difference in the world. Rather than what tends to be the case is we start judging people in the other camp or how these people are, what's going on with that. And it's going to be very hard to have any dialogue there. It's going to be very difficult. But if we recognize, then going back to the start, that everyone's trying to find happiness and they've had a different life than us. and they've been raised in a different culture than us, and their belief system has had different information than I have. You know, they still care about their kids. They still care about, you know, having happiness and well-being. They just have a different view on how that's attained. Well, then I can start, you know, getting at how I can speak to a person in that way, recognizing that just like me, they're trying to be happy. But maybe I've had some opportunities they didn't. Maybe they had some I haven't. Maybe I can learn from them. So as we enter into this teaching on compassion, the invitation for this first week is first to explore how we're seeking happiness and whether we notice that in others. So as you notice people acting in unhealthy ways or harmful ways, you know, can I recognize that they're somehow trying to avoid suffering in their own life and trying to be okay? As I engage in some unhealthy behavior, am I seeking pleasure? But is it healthy or not? I didn't buy ice cream today. I was thinking about it, but I want to cut it down. I was close. The pleasure was there, and I thought, you know what? Trying to get healthier. Didn't buy it. I would say that was a healthy choice. Sometimes I say, the heck with that, I buy the ice cream. But so I'm seeking happiness sometimes in a way that might give me a temporary pleasure, but I'm actually going to pay a price. Other times I may avoid something that might give me a short-term pleasure, but I'm going to feel good about who I am. And so this is where human intelligence has a great capacity to note, yeah, I want that, or I have a desire for that, but I really don't want it. What I really want is a different result. I have a desire, so a difference between a desire and what I really want. So I'd like to be healthier, for example, but I want to exercise. That's kind of an irrational thought, right? But I can hold that thought. But if I would like to get healthier, well, exercise can be helpful. I don't like it right away. Well, maybe I start doing it. So in this way, we will actually do things that are unpleasant for long-term happiness, or avoid something that would provide some happiness to have this. And so then we shift that intelligence now more realistically in the world as it exists and what true causes are and how that comes. And so this is where we're going here. But if I don't notice the pattern, it's going to be hard to really engage in cultivating those qualities. So I'm going to invite you this week to, see how our choices are either adding to happiness or not. Long-term happiness, not a short-term pleasure. We don't want to confuse those two. Doing things you feel good about, not just things that make you feel good, and resisting certain things, or doing something, because I want to be happy, that actually is going to create, less satisfaction. And then as I notice that in me, now I can look out there and I can notice that in you. Sound like a decent homework assignment for the week? Here and Now Center, is that a thumbs up, or what are we thinking? All right, cool. And here's the thing, and Lama Yeshe said it great. He said, because everybody wants happiness. And since ice cream is not the cause of happiness, you might want to look at what is. Not that ice cream is a bad thing. Small doses in moderation could be quite beneficial. I've just never heard of a single serving. Laura says these little bowls are what that is. I'm not sure how that works. So let's explore that this week. Then when we come back next week, we're going to dive into how then we start shifting our attitudes in relation to others. and how that's going to have a huge impact. So anyone, before we wrap up, have any questions, thoughts, comments, epiphanies, the epiphanies? Yes.
I'm just wondering about how this assignment relates to compassion.
So compassion, the definition that we'll work with is to remove suffering. So already we need to start noticing the source of much of my suffering is actually seeking happiness. And I may also notice how the suffering is there. So as I start to recognize these patterns that actually create suffering, I'm going to be able to cultivate compassion to remove it. So it's already a compassion activity to start noting how I'm creating suffering, right, in my lives and others. And then as I'm able to notice it in myself, I'm going to have compassion towards others as I notice they're doing some harmful things as they're trying to be happy. Does that make sense? What's your name, by the way?
Sharon.
Hi, Sharon. Did everybody get that out there? I forgot to repeat the question, but was how does this relate to compassion? All right, anyone, anything else before we do our dedication?
John,
Yes.
it's Devin.
Hey, Devin.
Hey, man. Hey, I just wanted to thank you. I've been leaning into your Dharma talks on Spotify
Oh,
a lot lately on the Four Noble Truths and stuff, and it's been a godsend. You helped me get through some stuff.
thank you, Devin.
I listened to that. Some like snapped me out of this really bad place.
Great to hear. Great to hear.
It really grounded me. So that's why I thank you via text not long ago. I'd like to thank you again. I really don't have much to say because I'm figuring it out.
Thank you, brother. Good to hear you. I'm glad you're doing well.
See you, bud.
Thank you. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a moment so we can prepare to dedicate our time and energy of our gathering. And pop it up here on the screen. So just taking a moment to once again recognize what a gift it is to come together to support each other in cultivating a meaningful life in this path of wisdom and compassion. And to explore these teachings by His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama, and recognize that in this process we have cultivated a great deal of merit and wisdom. And here we have an opportunity to dedicate it for the benefit of all other beings and for our own continued growth. By this merit, may I soon attain the enlightened state of Guru Buddha, that I may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. All right, well, thank you all so much. It's a joy to have another Wednesday evening with you, and I look forward to unpacking. I think it's going to be a couple more sessions. His Holiness put a lot in that. So I think you can't go wrong unpacking anything His Holiness says. So it's a joy to be able to do that with all of you. And I'm going to change my view here real quick. I can see everybody's there. Okay. All right. Well, you all be well. Take good care of yourselves and good care of those around you. Okay.
Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare